here we go. Senate Democrats expect their version of health care reform to pass before this time tomorrow. But what happens next in the health care battle, and what does all of this mean come election time next year? For a fair and balanced debate, we're joined by Tony Sayegh, a former press aide to Jack Kemp's vice presidential campaign and contributor to a blog called thehappyright.com, and Mo Elleithee is a former spokesman for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign and partner with Hilltop Solutions. Gentlemen, good morning to you both. Thanks very much for being here. And Tony, let me ask you first, because we're about 22 and a half hours from the final vote here in the Senate. There really is no stopping this thing now, is there?
Well, technically, there are certainly ways that this could slow down. You hear a lot of rumblings on the House side from Congressman Stupak and his very strong pro-life coalition of conservative Democrats saying that the language in the Senate bill on the abortion funding is unacceptable. But the reality is, as we've learned, there are hardly real things called conservative Democrats, and the reality is that the president and his political muscle within the Congressional Democratic Caucus could push this through and probably will get him something to be able to proclaim as victory on health care reform by the State of the Union. But the reality is the American people are speaking a completely different language on health care. Every poll after poll, the precipitous drop of approval on health care and the president has been enormous. They are so behind public opinion on this that I think it's irreversibly going to hurt them by the midterm election.
Mo, let's talk about what this bill is going to look like. Once it gets out of the Senate, as it looks like it will, and goes into what's called conference, where it's sort of, they bring the House version and the Senate version together and come up with something that's eventually going to make its way to the president's desk for a signature. Is there going to be a government-run public option? Is there going to be federal funding for abortion? What is this going to look like?
I think it's unlikely that you're going to see a public option at this point. But I do think that there are enough elements out there that both the House and the Senate leadership can agree on that we will have some sort of agreement by State of the Union or shortly thereafter. You're going to see a final bill that's going to eliminate pre-existing conditions. You're going to have a bill that reduces the cost of health care and increases access to people, and it's going to do it in a deficit-neutral way, or as the CBO scored, it'll actually reduce the deficit in the long term. So for all those reasons, I'm feeling really good about where we are heading into the midterms. Those are elements that the American people in poll after poll still want to see in health care. And I think once we get out of the sausage-making process of this, get into next year, Democrats are going to be happy to run on those elements. That's what people want. And Republicans are going to have to answer some really tough questions in the elections about why they said no to eliminating pre-existing conditions and reducing the cost of health care.
Well, it looks, Tony, like Republicans are going to be able to point come midterm elections and even come the presidential election in 2012, which will be before any of these benefits actually kick in for folks. Republicans will be able to talk about how your taxes have gone up pretty much across the board. People's taxes will have been raised as a result of this health care reform, and the benefits, as I just said, aren't really slated to take effect for a long time. Is that going to be sort of the rallying cry we're going to hear from the GOP?
Absolutely, Rick. I mean, as a political strategy for such a brilliant operation as President Obama ran when he ran for president, this seems kind of silly. We're going to start taxing the American people 4 years before we're going to actually give them the benefits on the product that we're taxing them for. 2014 is really when the majority of the positive effects, if there are any of this bill, are slated to take effect. I think people also realize that deficit neutral ultimately leads to higher taxes. Someone has to pay for this. And it's not going to just be from these very draconian Medicare cuts that Democrats seem to be favoring so much, $500 billion of Medicare cuts. There are three big winners on this health care bill, and the people know it, and the polling shows it. Big Pharma made sure that the reimportation of drugs was not included in this bill. That could have been $100 billion of savings to American consumers. The insurance companies, the much maligned insurance companies by Nancy Pelosi and her crew, are now going to inherit 30 million new customers, according to this new bill. And then you basically have a situation where not one stipulation in 2,000 pages have been made to change the way liability reform and malpractice reform is treated. making sure trial lawyers are completely exempt from any of these reforms, and defensive medicine has been known and established as one of the biggest reasons why healthcare costs are up. These three groups, big pharma, insurance companies, and trial lawyers, are the only people who should be popping champagne right now.
Mo, let me let you get in here, and let's talk politically about this idea of taxing people now, paying for this now before any of these supposed benefits actually kick in. That seems like a tough road to go down for Democrats. I mean, how are you going to explain that to voters?
Let's be clear. One of the first things this president did when he took office was reduce taxes on the middle class. 98% of Americans are paying less in taxes now than they did before President Obama came into office. Same with small businesses. He's actually expanded economic opportunity for small businesses and middle class families. And let's also be clear that under the current system, the system that the Republican leadership in the Congress supports, the status quo, people are already paying a hidden tax. They're paying that tax every time someone goes to the emergency room, and they got to pay for it out of their pockets. What we're doing, and what the Democrats in the Congress and the White House are doing, equalizing the playing field and reducing the cost of health care for people, both in the short and the long term, eliminating a lot of the fraud and waste and abuse in there. I find it amusing when I hear Republican leaders talk about how this is a huge boondoggle for the insurance companies when the Republican leaders refuse to even step up to the plate in the first place. They voted no every single step of the way, which is the insurance company's dream position. And so, you know, at least the Democrats are dealing with these key issues. They're eliminating pre-existing conditions and making health care more affordable.
I'll give you the last word, Tony. Anything that's going to be done, can you imagine Republicans being able to influence this process in conference at all, or even trying to?
The one thing we've understood from this entire process, Rick, is we have no balanced government in this country. We're fair and balanced on Fox, but not in the Capitol building. And that's why I think you're going to see undeniable losses for Democrats, to the point where they can possibly lose both houses. I'm not going to make that proclamation. I think they'll definitely lose the House, probably keep the Senate, but with significant losses there, because the people want to have a balanced government. We have not seen it in this process. You have 1,300 insurance companies in this country who are not allowed to compete. All we had to do was allow them to go over state lines, and that would have allowed them to compete, bring health care prices down, and liability reform could have helped as well.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much to Tony Saig and to Mo Elathi. And the great thing about predictions is that we get to keep these tapes, and we can play them back. So we'll see.
Do I get a bonus?
You get a bonus, Tony, if you're right. Gentlemen, thanks so much. Good to see you both. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
And to you.